Hello and welcome back, adventurers. This is Captain TTRPG, and today we're talking about Starfinder 2nd Edition. Welcome back, adventurers. Today we are going to rank the subclasses for the soldier here in Starfinder 2nd Edition. This will be the first ranking video I've done for the new system, so the classes will be thought of maybe a little differently just because I've seen the power level and some differences between Starfinder and Pathfinder 2nd Edition. But the ranking videos will probably still feel the same because it's just within its own class, right? We don't do class to class, so it may not feel that different. But when I'm discussing things, perhaps it'll sound a little different. We'll see. Who knows? By the end of this video, this intro may be useless. Anyway, before we jump into the rankings, I'll show you the criteria I use for ranking the subclasses against each other. And if you've seen any of my ranking videos before, this will feel very similar because it's the same ones I've been using for all of the subclass ranking. But for anybody new to it, let's dive right in here. I'll be ranking from S to D. An S rank subclass is one that is clearly mechanically stronger, particularly for combat, than other subclasses, while not falling behind in other pillars of play. It'll also naturally fit well with the class, and it'll build on the class maybe a little too much. Usually S means it almost lands in the default way to play or the right way to play the class, so I'm hoping not to see this very much, and we don't see it that often, but it does come up here and there. A is a subclass that will be strong in combat in any adventure. It not only is strong on its own, but it usually makes the team stronger, considering that Starfinder is, of course, a cooperative game, just like Pathfinder is. Also, this won't necessarily fall behind in other pillars of play, even if it doesn't have any advantages for those other pillars. It doesn't hurt you in any way. B is a subclass that is still mechanically strong on its own, or does a good job boosting the rest of the party, but really not both, and it is especially strong in certain campaigns where it fits right, whereas in others it may have a real challenge landing there, or it could be that it's got some aspects to it that are mechanically strong while others kind of hold it back, and it kind of runs that middle ground with them. C is a subclass that lands here just because it's really not that strong in combat really in any campaign at all, or at least no more than just the base class is on its own. It might not take advantage of the specialties of the class, so you might have a whole lot that's built into the class that it just doesn't take advantage of in the right ways, or doesn't build on top of, and therefore makes it kind of awkward. D is a subclass I put here because you want to avoid this. I don't know why they made it. It can be a struggle to use, and often these can be like bait subclasses where it looks really interesting, but once you get into the mechanics of it, it's going to be really hard to pull off or make any fun at all at the table. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and jump into the soldier here. With the soldier, we have 5 subclasses to rank. These are referred to in the class as the fighting styles, and they are the action hero, armor storm, bombard, close quarters, and erudite warrior. I'll walk through each fighting style and discuss its strengths, combat and counterplay style, benefits to other pillars of play, anything it's got going on with it. So what do we get as far as benefits from a fighting style? Well, it's not as easy to pin down as that. While we see a lot of classes where the subclasses will have exactly these 5 aspects to them, no, that's not really what we have with the soldier here. In fact, with the soldier, it's more of a, hey, how do you play around with the existing mechanics of the class, but it could be with any of the mechanics in a slightly different way. But it's usually leaning into certain types of weapons. So they do have a certain weapon that they lean into. So what we are going to be thinking about is what weapons, if any, are required. How is the base kit really expanded with this, or how does it take advantage of it? Does it require a certain style of play with your class? Because, of course, this is a varied class that could be played in a lot of ways. And is it supported by any of the feats? Keep in mind that there are no feats that have requirements of a specific subclass, though there are feats for this class that have a specific requirement for a certain type of weapon, which means that there are subclasses that will be locked out or will take greater advantage of certain feats potentially. With those in mind, let's go ahead and dive into our first subclass, the Action Hero. The Action Hero gives us really 3 improvements over the base mechanics. First, you can suppress a target by successfully striking it with an automatic weapon. So keep in mind, automatic weapons can auto-fire, which allows them to do an AoE, but they can be used to do single strikes like any other weapon. When you do auto-fire, the cone length, normally on auto-fire, is half the range. Like, you have range increments, so it's normally half the range increment. However, for the Action Hero, it's the full range increment. Keep in mind, that's a lot more. And your auto-fire always allows you to choose any creature in the cone as the primary target, another feature of yours, whereas primary target normally has to be the closest enemy to you that's in the area. Now you can choose any. With the Action Hero, the first thing to consider is the requirement of an automatic weapon. In this book, which is really all we have right now, there are only 4 automatic weapons. total. 1 simple, 2 martial, and 1 advanced. This means that the pool of available weapons is very small. This does vastly improve the use of automatic weapons, though. The ability to suppress with a single strike is actually a massive upgrade, because there may be times when you're only fighting 1 creature or 2 when they're spread apart. Having to do a full cone to try to suppress somebody would be really frustrating, whereas you can just single shot them, which makes a lot of sense anyway, because often we want to single target things down as a team. This helps you lay into that a little bit more. This can also help you against creatures with high saves but low AC, because, you know, they have all sorts of different stats. While these are fairly close and normalized, there are definitely those out there with lower AC that have really high saves to make up for it, and you don't want to try to do area attacks to them. The extended range is actually very important. When we look at half the range increment, keep in mind that the range increments on automatic weapons or area weapons, these tend to be fairly short. There's a really great range on the 1 advanced weapon we have, but the other ones, I think we max out at maybe 40 feet. So doing only half that, a 20-foot cone is really not amazing, especially to rely on the whole game. Whereas a 40-foot cone is actually pretty decent. So you're going to feel pretty good with that, especially since you get it from the word go. And then we have the primary target upgrade, where you get to choose any creature within the whole area as your primary target rather than closest. And this is really nice. I don't think it's quite as strong as the increased length to make the cone bigger, and I don't think it's as good as being able to suppress with a single shot, but it is still very nice. The closest target in your cone may not be the best target, but it does always give you a target. So in the end, being able to choose any is nice, but it's not really what's bumping this subclass up. What really hurts the subclass, of course, is the requirement of an automatic weapon with the slim set of choices we have. If we had a broader set, I'd say, okay, great. I actually like automatic weapons in concept. I like that they have the auto-fire AoE, but they still have the single target, making them very versatile. That's fantastic, but we need more of them. And then there's also the ammo expenditure problem with auto-fire. So when you figure out how much ammo you're expending when you're doing the auto-fire, you have to take the number of targets in the area, in the cone in this case, and yours is a very large cone. And for each one, you have to double whatever the expend says for the weapon. So assuming most times the expend is 1 per shot, if you catch 3 creatures in there, now you're expending 6 shots. And this can lead you to have to reload quickly, or you may not have enough for a whole cone, so you have to choose a cone that can actually use the ammo you have left. So there are some other challenges with that. There also aren't very many feats that are locked out by using an automatic weapon, so keep in mind that you still should have most things available to you. There's a few that require an area weapon specifically, which this isn't, but I don't think that's going to hurt much. So we've got some nice boosts from the extended range. We've got the boost of the single target suppress, which I think is the greatest part of this, if I can be honest with you. And then we got a little bit of downside because of our lack of choice. It's one of those that it's got some nice build, and then it's got some things that hurt it, which means if we had a wide selection, I'd be really tempted to call this an A, because I think the option to suppress on a single shot makes a huge difference, and the extended cone can be massive. But given our limited range of weapons here, I think it falls down to a B. And I hate that, because I really wanted this one to be an A just because I like automatic weapons concept so much. But still, I think it's a good choice. Just be aware you have to know what weapon you're going to use before going into it, or you may end up with a weapon you feel like just doesn't give you the distance you need. Next up is Armor Storm. Armor Storm is going to give us 5 improvements over the base mechanics. So first, you can't be hurt by your own area from area fire. This also counts for auto fire, but you shouldn't be in your own cone anyway. It's very easy, though, to create an area with area fire that you could be in, so you can't hurt yourself. You gain half your level with a minimum of 1 resistance to damage from suppressed targets. So everybody you're suppressing, now you're taking less damage. That's nice. Your shove, grapple, trip, reposition, and disarm don't require a free hand. So you can have your big 2-handed gun on and still do all of those. Also, those same 5 I named gain a +1 chance to succeed against suppressed targets. So great, you've already suppressed them, now you're going to trip them easier, whatever. Also, any target that you succeed at any of those 5 athletics things against is going to now be suppressed. So you trip somebody, they weren't suppressed before, now they're prone and suppressed. Ouch. This does not tell you what kind of weapon to use, which I like. Yes, you don't get much from melee by default, so, you know, there's not a ton of advantages to doing a melee build with this. It would kind of wipe out some of its own features, but area or automatic fire weapons both fit. The immunity really helps you more with area fire than it does with automatic fire, but still helpful beyond that. So I don't know that the not hurting yourself thing is going to matter a ton unless you plan on getting in the middle and just, firing down. Completely legitimate if you want to do that. This does mean that you're going to have to lean into strength, however. Well, at least for a little while. Well, okay. In the base class, there are a couple of athletics actions that you do get to use your con for instead of strength. However, it's not all of these. So you're still going to need to really lean into strength if you want to take advantage of all of the options here. So you're not really getting away from that. Now, assuming you're doing something like an area fire specifically, which I think this really fits the most for, so even though it doesn't require that, it's really what you get the most value out of here, you don't really need dex because you're area firing, which is a reflex save from enemies, nothing you're doing with dex, so you could just go strength and con here and you'd probably be fine, so keep that in mind. This means that you might also want to get a two-handed melee weapon just in case you want to switch weapons or take a wider range of feats, because again, all of your stuff does still work with a two-handed melee weapon. If you aren't planning to get into melee, though, then the subclass is absolutely wasted, right? You have to be up in melee to use any of the athletic stuff, and you have to be pretty much up in melee to take damage from, or potentially take damage from yourself. So you're really not getting a whole lot. Now, you don't have to be up in melee on your own to take advantage of the resistance from suppressed targets, so that's nice no matter what, but you wouldn't take a subclass, I don't think, just for that. It's not nearly strong enough. Also, this isn't really the melee subclass. Like, it kind of sounds like it is, but we have another class that's very much the melee subclass, and I think does a better job of being a melee subclass. This doesn't seem to know what it wants to be. I love grapple builds. I think they're amazing. You can be a crazy grappler out there. Doing all of those and getting bonuses to them are great to have. I also like ranged characters. This also has some stuff for that. Unfortunately, it's a really mixed bag, and it seems confused with itself almost. That's not to say you can't make it work. Absolutely. You can make great builds with this subclass. It could be very cool, but it doesn't naturally come together with itself as well as the other subclasses I think do. So while individual features will be good depending on what you're trying to do with your playstyle, I don't know that you're going to get the advantage of all of them necessarily unless you want to constantly run up in the middle of enemies and fire down, which if you want to, that sounds fun and very hilarious. So by all means, please do that. Having said that, I think this is a C because it just doesn't feel like it's cohesive with itself, and sometimes it almost feels at odds with the class a little bit. So I'm just going to stick it there, and I just know somebody out there is going to say it's an A. I respect that. For me, I just think it's a C. That brings us to the Bombard. The Bombard gives us just 2 improvements over the base mechanics. When you area fire, you can designate a number of allies equal to half your con mod, not to be in the area of the fire. So suddenly you can actually avoid hurting your enemies with your area fire. Creatures that succeed against your area fire are still suppressed. Not crit succeed, but succeed. This is kind of the other side to the action hero coin. Here you are stuck with area weapons, so no automatic weapons, you need area weapons, but this is a different kettle of fish, honestly. There are 9 area weapons across simple, martial, and advanced. I don't remember the numbers for each, but most of them land in martial. These are mostly cone, but there are examples of all types, cone, line, and of course burst, particularly in the martial weapon set. So already we are less constrained than Action Hero was. As for the feature boosts, keeping allies safe is actually pretty solid. Think about what you're doing there. You're creating giant cones, and normally it's really hard to avoid, especially if you've got melee allies, and you might. It's hard to avoid them with cones when you want to hit as many enemies as possible. Easier with lines or bursts usually, but cones are particularly problematic. So if you're going to the cone weapon, this could be especially important. This wasn't as big an issue when we were talking about the cones with the action hero because you could still single target fire even if you had multiple allies in the area. At least you still had an option, whereas area fire, you don't have that. You're just area firing. The number you keep safe will basically just be 2 always. I mean, it's half. Remember, we round down, so it starts out at a +4, assuming you're building yourself as most characters do. Finally, once you get up to like 19th level, you get to a +6, and then it'll be 3. So really, you're just saying 2 allies in the area won't take damage, and that should probably, for most teams, be enough. That isn't what makes this good, though. Suppressing creatures is a fantastic condition to give them. Reduction in speed is okay. Minus attacks is really good. So this is a really strong condition to throw on a whole bunch of enemies. The way the math of the game works is enemies around your level, or those slightly lower as well, it increases and gets better when they're lower. Around your level, the bulk of the dice rolls will be a success or a failure. More success than failure usually. Crit success being a very small piece at the top, Crit failure, oftentimes, if they're even level, is just at a 1. This means that when you use to suppress maybe less than half the enemies, there's a good chance you're going to suppress all of the enemies. Because it's going to be unlikely that they crit succeed very often. Maybe they only have a 10% chance of a crit success. So now you're looking at a 90% chance for each target to end up suppressed, even if they don't take damage. Or don't take full damage, I should say. Because it is still a basic reflex save. So this is a really strong controlling subclass. In fact, this is, in my opinion, the controlling subclass. So while there is some restriction from weapons, I think this fits really well with what's built into the class. It's taking full advantage of all of the features from the class, making you just better at what you already want to do, and you're helping allies out by not making it harder on them to be where they need to be and somehow interact with your effects. This, to me, is an A subclass. It shows you how to build on top of what's already there in a clean way that makes you good at what you care probably most about, which is the controlling side of it. The damage is important. The control is what sets your team up to win. And that brings us up to Close Quarters. Close Quarters gives us 4 improvements over the base mechanics. Some of these are a little harder to understand maybe than the last ones, but not too much. When you use a two-handed melee weapon, you qualify for feats with the area requirements. So feats that require to have an area weapon or automatic weapon, now you can take it with the two-handed melee weapons. When you're using a soldier feat, any two-handed melee weapon you're wielding gains the area burst 5 feet trait, and you're unaffected by your attacks with that weapon. Now, having the area burst 5 feet trait means that you have to use area fire to attack with it, much like you do an area weapon. However, that's only when you're using soldier feats or features. If you want to just strike with it, you can just strike with it. You didn't lose that. So it's very carefully worded to make sure you didn't lose that. Just like you can strike with it now, not only that, but you can make a regular melee strike with your two-handed melee weapon against your primary target instead of making a ranged strike with primary target as it's normally written. So you still get to use that when they're in the area of your area strikes. And finally, you are given the Whirling Swipe feat, which is a level 1 melee weapon feat, which sounds a whole lot like that second feature of this subclass we talked about, but it is slightly different. This subclass absolutely sends you down a certain path. If you aren't using a two-handed melee weapon, you have no subclass. So that is all you're using. It's that easy. However, there are lots of two-handed melee weapons. 8 to be exact, so similar to our area weapons, but they have a lot of different traits on them as well. And all but 1 are martial. So you are living in the martial world of two-handed weapons. There are a few things to note about the features here. The first is that you'll be able to take about any feat. There are feats that require an automatic weapon or require a weapon with the area trait that you won't be able to take. So it's just those specifically, but those are very few and far between. But you can take the rest. The second, and this was the big one for me, that the weapon is only granting you the area burst 5 feet trait when you're using a soldier feat. And I really emphasize this. You can still just walk up and smack people with strikes. Okay, that is a good thing. Now, it does also mean you can't just decide to go up and do an area attack with your weapon just by choosing to do it. However, they gave you Whirling Swipe. That's essentially what Whirling Swipe does. It says you can walk up and for 2 actions, you can just do an area strike. So you can just do it whenever you want as well. So it all really comes together to give you all those options. Also, because you got a melee weapon, I really think there's a great way you can take advantage of these early level feats. There's even stuff starting at level 2 that really plays into the nice melee build you can put together here. So it obviously does change up your playstyle for the class in many ways. And one problem with that is it does hurt some of the features. Keep in mind that yes, you're getting to take advantage of the area suppression, you're getting to take advantage of primary target, all of that when you're using area with your melee two-handed weapon. But it's a burst 5 feet weapon, where area weapons or automatic weapons using auto fire might relatively easily hit, say, 4 enemies because of the size that they can create. The chance of you getting more than 2 is going to be slim unless they choose to surround you. So a big part of what you're getting out of the class is the suppression from the area, but your area is tiny. So suddenly you've got a lot of options given to you because of the way that they built the two-handed mechanics here. But at the same time, you've got a lot taken away from you because you just can't hit the battlefield like the others can. And that's why, again, kind of like we had with Action Hero, I'm giving this a B because what they do well, like really well. But what they lose from the class's identity does hurt them. So keep in mind, this is a trade-off subclass, but it can be really great, and I do think you'd have a lot of fun being a melee area smacking brute. Finally, we had the Erudite Warrior. The Erudite Warrior gives us 3 improvements of the base mechanics. First, you choose Society or Diplomacy, and a lore to become trained in, whatever lore you want. So the others aren't getting that. That's cool. I like skills. The skills also then go up to Expert, Master, and Legendary on their own at levels 7, 13, and 17, respectively. Auto-scaling skills is no joke. Don't take that for granted. That's solid. Especially if you're going to lean into Charisma and go Diplomacy. Diplomacy can be a really solid skill to have. And of course, lores can be really valuable depending on what you're choosing for your campaign. Then you gain a new action that lets you suppress a creature within 60 feet once per round. No save. One action, suppression, no save. It goes away, however, if the creature targets you with any offensive abilities. So when they target you, suddenly they're not suppressed anymore. They can do what they want to, and they're not penalized. This is by far the most unique of the 5 subclasses. You aren't restricted in your choice of combat style at all. Straight up, it's whatever you want it to be, because it's not talking about the weapons you're using. You could use automatic, area, melee, whatever, without losing your features at all. The skills you gain, improving on their own is actually what makes them really valuable. Like, getting a skill is great, but don't undervalue how much auto-scaling skills are worth. There's a lot you can do with both of the skills that they offer there, although I do like Diplomacy better of the 2, and auto-scaling lore is also really solid because you should at least have some idea of what lores matter for your campaign. The action you're given is so incredibly versatile. It needs further examination. Generally speaking, soldiers suppress targets in their AoE. Right? So let's take a cone. But in all those classes, there's a check required as well. So you're going to hit this cone, and all the enemies you're getting in there can be suppressed. Well, guess what? That's still true here. Only all those ones get a chance to save. What if that was all the enemies and one of them saved? No, it didn't. You're now suppressed. One action, boom, you're suppressed. Or you've got a group of enemies, but maybe you've got that, boss in the back or some ranged fighter who wasn't in the collection, boom, suppressed. Given this availability of a one-action suppression is really strong, right? It not only complements the area you're already doing, if you're not doing that, it's kind of like what we had with action here, where you've got a single target you can suppress. Only that one you had to still hit them with a shot. This one you're just like, suppressed. And that's really great. That lets your allies really build on top of the debuffing you're already doing, and it fits nicely on a build that's really reliant on 2-action activities most of the time, right? We've got auto fire, we have area fire. These are already 2-action activities that you're doing time and time again, leaving you just one action. Sometimes you'll need to move and you won't have the option to do anything else. But other times you're going to be left with one action left over and just decide, what do I do with this? Maybe you want to demoralize. Maybe you may have all sorts of things you want to do with this one action. The smartest thing might be to step first before you fire. But there's going to be plenty of times you're like, I've got this one action left. What's the best thing I can do with it? And almost every time it's going to be auto suppress, because that is so strong when there's no save involved and no check from you. Don't underestimate something as strong as that. This is an A. It takes the features we've got, makes you still allowed to be good at all of them and build anything you want. And on top of that, just say you're suppressed and my skills are going up on my own. At first, I didn't think this was the most exciting when I just did a scan of it. Coming back to it, really analyzing it, this is an extremely strong choice. So just consider it. I think this is an A. And those are all the fighting styles. What do you think? Was I too harsh on Armor Storm? Or maybe you think the Bombard is absolute trash? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, adventure on.